Mishpacha, it's Courtney, America's Jewish mother, and I am back with another Friday Reads video. So this week I only finished one book, but I am also currently reading 4 books, so let's get into it. The book that I finished this week was Hope and Other Dangerous Pursuits by Laila Lalami. This is Lalami's debut. I want to call it a novel, but it's really, it is a novel, but it's really more like a series of interconnected short stories. So it starts off with a story called The Trip, where you see over 24 Moroccans in a boat attempting to cross the Strait of Gibraltar to make it over to Spain. And then in the rest of the book, you follow 4 specific characters who all appear in The Trip. And there's a section called Before, and you see what their lives were like prior to attempting to make the trip. And you see what led them to make the decision that they did to try to illegally cross to Spain and start a new life. And there, like I said, there are 4 characters. So there's 2 women and 2 men. So there's Faten, Halima, Murad, and Aziz. Those are 4 characters. And then there's also a section called After, and then you see what their lives are like after they made the decision to make the trip, from the titles, from the beginning story. And yeah, so I actually really liked this book. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I found it a very compelling and quick read. It is a short book. It's not even 200 pages long, but I felt like for the brief amount of space, Lalami does a good job of drawing the characters and sucking me into their stories. And the thing is that all of the characters have different motivations, right? Like none of them are leaving to try to make it from Morocco to Spain for the same reason. So they all have, different motivating factors, and then different things happen to them after they make the trip from the opening story. And I liked that about it. The only thing is I wish it was longer. Like I actually would have liked to have seen more of these characters and their lives and thought processes. So even though I felt like Lalami does a good job of, fairly well rendering the characters in such a short amount of space, I actually wanted more. But that's probably a good complaint to have, that a book left you wanting more. So yeah, this makes me really look forward to reading more of Lalami's work in the future. And yeah, I think for me, the best story was still the one that I talked about at some length in my last Friday Reads video, which is the second story in the collection called The Fanatic. I really liked that story. I thought it was excellent as just like a standalone story by itself, although obviously it fits into the collection as well. I actually would have liked to have seen or known what happened to some of the secondary characters from these stories, especially the father and daughter from The Fanatic, but you don't really get that sort of sense of resolution from this because it's following Faten and not them. So yeah, I like this overall, gave it 4 stars, would definitely recommend it, especially if you have an interest in books about immigration and migration, or contemporary Arab American literature, or anything like that. Or if you just like interconnected short story kind of books, it's also good for that. So yeah, 4 stars. So on to what I am currently reading. I am still doing my buddy read of Love in the Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez with Greg of Supposedly Fun. We are, I think, more than 2/3 of the way into this. We're checking in again on Sunday, and then we'll just have one check-in left after that. So we're fairly far along. In the section we read for this past time, and basically I think all of the sections show you a kind of contrast between the life of Florentino and the life of Fermina. And the last section that I read was no different. You see more of the relationship between Fermina and her husband, Dr. Juvenal Urbino, and you see the development of that relationship. Whereas with Florentino, you just get kind of a series of meaningless affairs that kind of all blend together after a while, because he just has affairs with so many women. So they, again, you just sort of forget them and they all sort of merge into one after a while. But yeah, so definitely a study in contrast. I'm still enjoying it. I'm curious to see how it will wrap up, especially when it comes back to, or I assume it comes back to the part at the beginning where you see Dr. Urbino die, and then Florentino comes to Fermina's house and declares his love for her again after 50 plus years, and she, you know, sends him away angrily. So I'm kind of hoping they're going to come back to that so we can see how that resolves. Oh, the other thing was, I think I said about this last week that I was a little bit frustrated because we didn't really, at that point, we still didn't really have a sense of why Fermina made certain decisions that she made. So we finally got that in the section that Greg and I read for last week. So I was very happy to finally get more insight into Fermina's thought process. So yeah, I'm still enjoying that. I'm also still doing my buddy read of Louise Erdrich's The Plague of Doves with Lindsay of Lindsay's Book Life. We are about 90 pages into this, so this has different narrators. So we finished Evelina's section. She kind of opens the book. And I'm not really sure how I feel about this book yet. Honestly, it hasn't quite grabbed me in the way that Louise Erdrich's other novels that I've read have grabbed me. But that's possibly because this is a different set of characters and I'm still kind of trying to remember who everyone is. And unfortunately, this book does not have a handy little genealogy at the beginning that I can just refer back to every few pages. So that's a little bit of a bummer, but it is interesting, and I am curious to see how the other narrators will fit into this story of, the book opens with the murder of a family, and you see how Evelina and her family are tied to that. So I'm curious to see where it will go with the other narrators, so still interested in this. I also, and I don't have this here with me because it's an audiobook, but I started reading 2 days ago, or listening to rather, because it's an audiobook, The Regatta Mystery and Other Stories by Agatha Christie, and this is just a collection of short stories that feature, I think there's one story that features Miss Marple, and several that feature Hercule Poirot, and a couple that feature Parker Pyne, who is not someone I knew about before I started listening to this. And it has 9 stories in the collection. Each of the stories is about 30 minutes long to listen to. So it's quite a short audiobook. It's less than 5 hours, and I'm about a third of the way into it already. I've listened to 3 stories. And yeah, it's enjoyable. I have to say, I don't know that I really like Hercule Poirot, even though I know he's a beloved character. I just find him kind of annoying. So we're gonna see. I am gonna hold, I was intrigued by the Parker Pyne story, and there's another one, at least one other one with him in it, and I'm looking forward to the Miss Marple story. But yeah, this experience of listening to this audiobook might put me off of trying an Hercule Poirot novel or anything like that, although I definitely want to read more about Miss Marple. But yeah, I didn't put this on my October TBR. This was a complete, like, I'm just in the mood for a cozy mystery, and I'm reading some things that are sort of serious right now, and I want something that's like light and not that serious. So it's like, all right, I'm gonna listen to this audiobook with cozy mystery stories. So yeah, seems very sort of seasonally appropriate pick. So enjoying that. I also started reading this week Begin Again, James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own by Eddie S. Glaude Jr. I hauled this book not that long ago and talked about how excited I was to read it, and so I prioritized it for October. I like this so far. I'm 55 pages into it. I do have the same sort of issue with this that I had with Imani Perry's biography of Lorraine Hansberry, which I read 2 years ago or whenever it came out, called Looking for Lorraine, which is that Imani Perry's book is it's like such a love letter to Lorraine Hansberry that like any trace of objectivity is, you know, totally removed from it, even though she's an academic. And the same thing is kind of true here of Glaude's book about Baldwin. You know, he keeps referring to him as Jimmy as if they were like personal friends or something. And, you know, there's just sort of no sense of objectivity. And like, that's fine. I get that you know, in any sort of writing, there's going to be subjectivity involved. But again, Glaude is an academic, and I'm just like, where's the objectivity? Where are the citations of sources and things like that? But I am still enjoying it, and he just said something at the end of the chapter I finished yesterday that I thought was very smart, and I wanted to read it. We are told every day not to believe what we see happening all around us, or what we feel in the marrow of our bones. We are told, for example, that Trumpism is exceptional, a unique threat to our democracy. This view that Trump, and Trump alone, stresses the fabric of the country lets us off the hook. It feeds into the lie that Baldwin spent the majority of his life trying to convince us to confront. It attempts to explain away as isolated events what today's cell phone footage exposes as a part of our everyday experience. Exceptionalizing Trump deforms our attention. It becomes difficult to see what is happening right in front of us, and it secures our self-understanding from anything he might actually represent. If anything, Trump represents a reassertion of the belief that America is and will always be a white nation. Today, our task remains the same, no matter its difficulty or the magnitude of the challenge. Some of us must become poets, but we must all bear witness. Make the suffering real and force the world to pay attention to it, and not place that suffering all at the feet of Donald Trump, but to understand it as the inevitable outcome in a country that continues to lie to itself. So that insight, to me, is worth, you know, wading through the sort of lack of objectivity and the, like, clear just fanboying over James Baldwin, which, I mean, I get. I love me some James Baldwin. I would fangirl too. But yeah, that I thought was a very sharp insight that when we sort of blame everything on Trump, it lets us not have to face up to our own part in all of this, and to say that, well, you know, Trump is some sort of aberration when really he's not. He's like the culmination of all of the things that happened before him, and that blaming everything on him by saying like, oh, well, if we just elect him out of office, or, you know, once he goes away or whatever, it's all going to go back to normal. It's not. I mean, unarmed black men and women were still killed while Obama was in office. Things were definitely not perfect. Things are still going to need to be addressed after Trump. And just because whenever we, please God, make it to the after Trump time, things are still going to need to be done. And we can't just pretend like, oh, thank God, we can all just heave a collective sigh of relief because the bad guy is gone now. It doesn't work that way. So I really like that. I thought that was a super sharp insight. So I'm looking forward to more of that here. So that is everything that I either have read or am currently reading this week. I would love to hear what you have been reading and enjoying this week. If you have thoughts about any of the books I mentioned, please feel free to leave me a comment down below. Thank you for watching this. I hope you're all staying healthy and well. I hope you're doing good reading. And until next time, would it kill you to call your mother?